Hello and welcome to the Connected Community Podcast. Today, my guest is Nicole Jones, who is a licensed professional counselor, a clinical brain spotting practitioner. She's a yoga and Ayurvedic therapist and a money mindset coach. She has so much wisdom and so much knowledge, and she has been practicing brain spotting for the last 10 years. She talks about her journey of finding brain spotting, how brain spotting comes from the EMDR system, how it helped her work through her postpartum depression that she wasn't even aware that she had, and her money mindset issues, and how it's helped so many of her clients. This is really a deep dive into the topic of brain spotting. I enjoyed this podcast so much. Please, if you enjoy them, take a moment to give us a like, a share, and a subscribe. So much gratitude if you leave a comment or a review. And I want to thank you so much for being here today. I hope you'll enjoy today's episode. Hello, and welcome to the Connected Community Podcast, a place to explore possibility through mindfulness, movement, and self-discovery. Our intention is to deliver insight and inspiration while fostering conversations that are genuine, unfiltered, and deeply human. We hope you will enjoy today's episode. Hi, Nicole. Welcome to the Connected Community Podcast.
Hi, Nikki. I'm so glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm happy to have you. I'm excited about our topic today because we're going to be talking about brain spotting. I have very little experience with brain spotting. I had someone at a workshop kind of pair us up and have us do it with each other. But I don't really feel like I've had a full experience of brain spotting, and a lot of people are talking about it. And so I'm just going to dive into this topic and ask you, what exactly is brain spotting and where did this technique evolve from?
Yeah, so brain spotting is a brain body based intervention, and it actually evolved from EMDR. So, David Grand is the founder of brain spotting, and he works with high level athletes, he still does, but he was exclusively back then. And he was working with this Olympic ice skater, I believe, and she could never do this specific maneuver. So he was working with her and he had his pen and he was kind of going across her line of vision, doing her EMDR. And he noticed that every time she passed a specific place in her vision, her eye would kind of wobble. It would kind of jump a little bit. So he said, let's just stay here and see what happens. So what she started to do was process all of this trauma that she held in her body around her parents' divorce and her experience of it as a child and how she sort of felt stuck and all these things. And then the next day she did the maneuver that she'd never been able to do. She landed it.
Oh, yeah.
So he was like, okay, I'm onto something. And it's evolved from there. So then back then he just would like see, this is one of my pointers. He would be using the pointer and he'd watch for the body's reflexes. So like an eye wobble, a blink, a yawn, a shift in their bodies, a twitch or something. And he'd say, okay, let's just stay here and see what happens. And people just started having all these experiences of, grief and trauma and old memories and old things that had happened come up and then they started feeling better. So there's several different ways of doing brain spotting, but that's sort of the way that it all got started. I found it when I was going through my own therapy for postpartum anxiety. And then after that, I was like, going to work with people, I have to learn how to do this. So that's where it came from and how I kind of got into it. It's my own experience of anxiety. Yeah.
And you're a licensed professional counselor. So were you doing EMDR at any point? No, you weren't. Okay.
No. The therapist that I saw, we did a couple of sessions at EMDR, but I really preferred the brain spotting for my system. So I've experienced EMDR, but I've never had any sort of training in EMDR at all.
Okay. And so you've been doing brain spotting for 10 years. Is that correct?
Longer. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's interesting to me because EMDR is relatively new as far as therapeutic modalities go. And so you must have gotten into brain spotting really early after it was discovered. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think brain spotting's been around about 20 years now.
Okay. So when you say you prefer it to EMDR and you've had the experience of both, what did you prefer about it? What resonated with your body?
For me, brain spotting is yoga. Like that's how I'm a yogi. And to me, it feels like yoga. It's this continuously going back to the body, noticing what's happening in your body with this love and compassion without any
Hmm.
sort of judgment. It's just like when you're on your mat and your teacher's like, notice what's happening in your body. And you
Hmm.
just keep returning to that place over and over and over again. And whenever your mind goes off somewhere else, you bring it back to the body. So brain spotting is this, to me, it feels like a very yogic intervention.
Hmm.
And even in the trainings, they talk about trataka and focused mindfulness as the core. I mean, the yogis have been using the eyes for
Yeah.
forever, right?
Yeah.
Um, so, and even before I knew those things, it just really resonated with me. I could really tap into what was happening in my body when I would look at these specific brain spots that my own therapist would lead me to, or I would lead her to, however the session was going. And it felt so organic and it felt gentle and it felt incredibly resourcing, which I also feel like is a yogic way of being. Is every time you can turn towards your body and turn towards your pain and turn towards the discomfort, it starts to soothe the nervous system. It might take a little time to feel
Yeah.
safe to do that, but it's this just turning towards that immediately resonate with me.
Yeah. And from my understanding, you're moving your hand or you're moving an instrument and you're looking for that shift in the like eye wobble or the yawn. And then you find a spot, and that spot could be completely different for if you have 10 people, it could be a completely different spot for all 10 people, correct?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. So if you're doing a brain spotting session with me and say you're talking about anxiety and you're typically listening to bilateral sounds, and then it's like, okay, I'm
Wait, you
feeling,
do the bilateral sounds at the same time as the brain spotting?
yep.
Okay. And so I'm assuming that the person would need headphones.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
Right. Okay.
Yep. Yep. So listening to bilateral sounds through headphones, and you have my pointer,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like, okay, where do you feel this anxiety in your body? And I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, my chest is just really, really tight. So I take the pointer,
Mm-hmm.
say, tell me what happens when you look here.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing. There's no difference. Okay, what about over here?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, maybe it's a little less over there. Okay, what about over here?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah, something's going on there. Okay, so then I like will move it gently across their line of vision. And I'm either watching them for cues and I'll say,
Mm-hmm.
okay, what's happening when you look right here? Or they tell me, they'll be like, oh, right there. It's right there. And okay, so let's stay here. And I just want you to have your eyes on this spot
Mm-hmm.
and tap into that feeling in your body, that anxious feeling you have in your chest. And let's see what happens. And sometimes people will be like, I do not want to look at that spot. Why is it so hard for me to look at that spot? That's terrible.
Hmm.
Or they just start like, why am I crying? Or why am I laughing? Um, all these things, all sorts of things can happen when you find a brain spot. Um, so that's and then you just stay there and you follow what comes up.
You stay in that spot.
You stay in the one
I'm
spot.
continuing to stare in that spot.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. And
So you
then
stay there.
while I'm are you talking to me?
Well, I will check in, and it
Mm-hmm.
really, really depends on your client. There's some people
Yeah.
who need more of that resource, more of their rootedness. And then
Mm-hmm.
there's my clients who have been brain spotting for a while and they're just like, just let me go. Right.
And
But if
do they
someone,
associate? Do they free associate?
I would say so. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. The thing is when you're brain spotting, the goal is to be back in this limbic subcortical brain.
Mm-hmm.
And whenever you engage them in talking, then you're
Yep.
engaging the prefrontal cortex and
Yep.
you're pulling them out of the
Yep.
subcortical brain. So we ideally want to intervene as little as possible, unless they're going outside of their window of tolerance, they're overwhelmed, they're flooded.
Mm-hmm.
Or, some clients just need to kind of know you're there, paying attention to me the whole time I'm sitting here
Mm-hmm.
staring at this spot, which can feel really bizarre at
Yeah.
first. Like, why am I staring at that?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then they just kind of go, and sometimes people will be very, very quiet. Sometimes people are very talkative. It all depends on your client and what they need. And that's a big part of brain spotting, is being what we call in the tail of the comet. So the client is the comet and we follow them wherever they go. So
Yeah.
some clients need more, some need less, some needs more direction, some need more resource and grounding. It really
Mm-hmm.
depends on the client.
And so if you and I were brain spotting
Mm-hmm.
and I found this point near the picture on the wall behind you,
Mm-hmm.
um, is that typically the spot I'm going to find every time, or does it change from session to session? It changes.
It can change. It can stay the same. It's like this. We're always joking in brain spotting. It was always like, it depends. But, I have some clients who I was working with a client last night, and we have what's called a resource spot for her. And we call it her Savannah spot because it was her dog that she loved dearly, dearly. And she makes the image makes her feel safe. So she's got this spot over here, over here.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like always where she can go to feel resourced and grounded if she needs to.
Mm-hmm. It's a
So
safe place.
that kind of can always stay the same.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't always have to be that. From session to session, it can really depend.
Okay. And in the whole session, typically my spot's going to stay the same for the entire session.
I would say typically,
yes.
but I always invite my clients because their body knows way more than I do. And that's another principle in brain spotting, is the uncertainty principle. So I will invite my clients, if you really feel like your eyes are like, we're here, but you really want to go over here and up, listen and see what's there.
Mm-hmm.
So they will be here for a while, and then they're like, oh, I don't know, there's just really something up here I want to explore. And I'll let them go there and then say, okay, now what are you noticing now that your eyes are there?
Mm-hmm.
And they might have a different physical sensation in their body, or they might feel more grounded, or they could feel more activation.
Mm-hmm.
So it's always an organic unfolding. But at the end, I'll often bring them back to this original spot and say, let's just check in here and tell me, what are you noticing now? And sometimes they're like, oh, it's still pretty activated. I'm at still at a 3 or a 5 or whatever. Or sometimes it's like, oh, nothing. It's good. I feel no activation when I look at that spot anymore.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm thinking in EMDR, we don't ever go across the line of vision of the therapist's face, but that's not a thing in brain spotting. You're going across your face.
Yeah. Ideally, we're trying to find where the eye level is.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I'm like right in front of my face all the time because my clients are sitting either virtually or they're sitting right across from me on my couch. So
Right.
I'm often here. And there's also in brain spotting, this is like the attachment. So sometimes our face is the brain spot.
Mm-hmm. Like that's the trigger.
That's the where if they're activated and they're like, I need to look at you. Like this, you are my brain spot right now.
Mm-hmm.
So trigger, maybe not necessarily, but it's like you as often a grounded, positive attachment figure.
Mm-hmm. So if somebody's coming in for brain spotting, I'm assuming it would unfold in the beginning as a normal session where if I come to you and I'm saying to you, I have really extreme social anxiety, and every time I go out in public, I feel like I'm having a panic attack.
Mm-hmm.
And so in EMDR, we would go way back to like, when was the first time that you felt that?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I remember when I was 5 years old, I felt that. And I don't know why, but I'm thinking in brain spotting, you work with what's in front of you.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, there's some brain spotting therapists who don't even take history at all.
Okay.
You come in and what unfolds in front of us is what unfolds. So, but yes, so I would say to you, okay, when you think about going out in public, what does your body feel like?
Mm-hmm. So I'd say, let's just role play. Cause,
Yeah.
all right. So when I go out in public, I feel like my hands start sweating and I feel like I'm going to jump out of my skin, and I feel my whole body tenses up and I want to run.
Yeah. Okay.
This is
So
not my story, but let's just go with
it's a
it.
good story.
Yeah.
So, and then so those feelings you're having in your body right now, what would you rate them on a scale of 0 to 10, 10 being the most intense? How much you can feel right now?
Okay. So as I'm talking about it, it's an 8 because
It's an
even
8.
thinking about it is an extreme.
Okay. So then I'd take my pointer and I'd say, what happens to that 8 when you're looking here? Does that
Mm-hmm.
8 get more intense? Does it get less intense, or does it stay the same?
Mm-hmm. Okay. I don't
And
know.
then yeah, yeah. And then we kind of test it out. Like we kind of test like where you feel it. And then if this really depends on the therapist, but it's like, they're like, oh, I really feel it over here. So then you might explore like up, down, and like, what about if I go a little bit further or a little more
Mm-hmm.
close to me? Um,
You're
and then
looking
we
for the
find that
sweet
spot.
spot. You're looking to find the sweet spot. And then you found it when it's more intense. Like, oh, when you go over here, now I'm feeling like it's a 9 and I'm feeling, I know you don't want to go to overwhelm,
Right.
but maybe that point right before overwhelm.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And different clients can handle different things. Some clients can handle a 9.
Mm-hmm.
Some clients can't handle a 3,
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, okay, if we're here, can you be here? Can you manage it?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes they're like, I can't. So then there's other ways of, grounding them, or I do this thing called being on the edge of the bullseye. So say your spot is right here, but back here's where you kind of start feeling the activation. I go there
Mm-hmm.
just to kind of keep them out of that like
Mm-hmm.
floodedness, because, you are never going to heal if you're in a trauma state.
So what are some of the other grounding techniques when somebody's feeling flooded and overwhelmed?
Well, I will guide them through breathing practices, taking their energy down their body, just basic orienting around the room. Or I'll invite them to find a spot that feels better, because you can find the activation spot, which is where you like your social anxiety, you're feeling like, feel
Mm-hmm.
that, high. Okay. So where in your body do you feel grounded and at ease? Because some clients can't do the activation yet. They can't do that. It's too much.
Mm-hmm.
So with your example,
Mm-hmm.
if you're like, okay, that's too much, I can't do that. Okay, well, where do you feel calm and grounded in your body?
Mm-hmm.
You just give me your like, oh, my
My
feet feel
feet.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, my feet, my seat. That's kind of usually the thing. My hands feel okay. All right, let's work from that spot.
Mm-hmm.
So then we'll go through the same thing. Can you really feel into that groundedness or that ease or relaxation? Or sometimes I even ask my clients, like, how would you describe the sensation you're having in your feet? Well, I
Mm-hmm.
just feel relaxed. Okay. Can you really feel relaxed when you look here in your feet, or over here, and kind of go through that same thing. And then we process from like kind of the back door. And
Mm-hmm.
all roads lead to Rome in brain spotting. So
Mm-hmm.
we can work from that resource place, which some clients really, really need.
Mm-hmm.
And we can work from the activation spot, which can sometimes feel really difficult for certain clients. And some clients, like their 9 is like, cool, let's do this. Like, I want to
I want
do
to go through
this.
it.
Yeah.
Okay, so if I'm an 8 or a 9 with social anxiety, and the thought of going out to a party or going to a work social event is an 8 or a 9, but going to the grocery store is a 3. If I'm feeling really overwhelmed in that 8 or 9, would you then, I know like client dependent, but then would you take me to the grocery store and work with that and do baby steps up?
I would work with whatever happening in your body in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
You could, yes, definitely say like, okay, well, just, think about going to the grocery store and tell me how that feels. That feels less. But really, I want to know what's happening in your body right now in this moment, because
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it's like grocery store versus, a party. Yeah, two different things, but sometimes the body is always responding the same. So it's like, let's just work with what's here now.
Mm-hmm.
I'll always start with what's in front of me, but then sometimes it is that matter of like, okay, that's too much. Let's not work with the smoking gun, right? Let's do this so it's less intense for you,
Yeah.
because nervous system likes to heal in little tiny slow increments. We don't want to like bulldoze through anything ever.
Mm-hmm. I mean, one of the things that attracted me to EMDR, and it sounds similar in brain spotting, is
Hmm.
that there's not this requirement to go deep in story,
Hmm.
that you can process, say, a giant trauma, like a big T trauma, like sexual abuse, without retelling the story.
Yes, that is definitely a part. Brain spotting, people do not have to have a story at all.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes they just have a sensation. And sometimes they don't even have that.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're working a little bit differently, but you don't have to tell the story at all. And I'll say that to my clients. You don't have to relive this. You don't have to take me through every detail of the
Mm-hmm.
story. We just start with what's happening in your body or in your psyche, your mind, your spirit right now.
Yeah.
Because sometimes it's like, I know there was pre-verbal trauma. I don't have a story, but I know I have a pit in my stomach, or I have a lot of anxiety, or I have depression, or, fibromyalgia, or, whatever it
Mm-hmm.
is.
Yeah. And so when you're working with clients, do you feel like everybody is a candidate for brain spotting?
I think that everybody's a candidate for brain spotting, but I don't think it works for everybody all the time. Like I have
Mm-hmm.
some clients who just don't really, there's it's just not their jam. I mean, if I would love to find that one intervention that worked miraculously for everyone, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
that's what we're all kind of would love to help our clients move through their pain as quickly as possible. Uh, but I do try it with all my clients for sure.
Yeah. Do you mix it with other modalities? And the reason I ask this is so EMDR therapists need to have a whole bag of other tricks so
Mm,
that they can lean on those. And then we're building that relationship and that rapport. And not everybody is a candidate for EMDR, or it's a slow moving towards it.
mm,
But then when you do the EMDR process, you're committing to that process and not jumping in and out of therapy. Like you can't go from psychodynamic to EMDR to psychodynamic. You just need to
mm.
stay within the EMDR framework while you're doing that technique. And I'm just kind of curious if there's a similarity with brain spotting.
I don't think so. I don't think we have to stay within the, in the brain spotting container all the time because we're always following the client and what they need.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so sometimes, I'll be doing brain spotting with someone and maybe we're close to the end of the session and there's something coming up. So I have another technique I use called holographic memory resolution. And I'll be like, let's just kind of shift into this. We're going to just shift a little bit
Mm-hmm.
because we've got 10, 15 minutes left. And I just kind of want to see what's here. And we'll do that. I'm coachy. I have a strong history in yoga and Ayurveda. So I'm like always bringing in all these
Mm-hmm.
pieces. I'm definitely more of a, mindfulness based
Holistic.
CBT, holistic, like
Yeah.
sort of that kind of stuff. So that's kind of always there, but we can pull in whatever we want. Breath work, guided imagery. People are just creating all these different ways of using brain spotting all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But it's never just once we start brain spotting, we have to stay within that frame. It's always, what's next, what's going to help my client the most in this moment.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like it's very present focused, like whatever they bring in, whatever they're wanting to
Mm-hmm.
work on, whatever is present in the moment when they walk into your door or they come
Yep,
onto camera.
that's right.
Yeah. Interesting.
That is
Okay.
correct. That's another yogic piece, right? This like present moment awareness.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, well, actually, I'm really curious about um, your own experience with brain spotting and how, I mean, obviously it made a big enough impact that you're like, I want to do this. This is the modality. But I would love for you to share your story and dive deeper a little bit into that so people can really see how it heals and what it does for people.
Yeah. So, like I said, I started my own brain spotting around perinatal anxiety, which I actually didn't even realize I had. I didn't even know that I had it until I serendipitously ended up on this team at this place I was working to support moms, and I had to take a training, and I was like, oh my god,
Mm-hmm.
I have postpartum anxiety and it's still there. And my daughter was like 4.
Oh
So
gosh. Yeah.
yeah, so it was like, so then I put myself in therapy and I found the brain spotting therapist where she did brain spotting, EMDR, hypnosis, all this stuff. And I uncovered so much stuff around my own history with my own mom that
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know. I thought my mom was like the best mom in the world, which she's great, but she was 20 years old when she had me.
Mm-hmm.
My dad was an alcoholic. I wasn't planned. She was like rejected. Like all these things that
Mm-hmm.
came up in her were like alive in me. It's this whole epigenetic piece of
Yeah,
things.
100%. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so just like working through my own stuff around what it meant to be a mom
Mm-hmm.
and how unstable and unsafe I felt as being a mom and unsure. And then my anxiety showed up as being really sort of obsessive about health and toys and organic food. And like, here I am in Boulder, Colorado, which everyone feeds into that stuff.
Yeah,
So
totally.
I like,
You fit right
you
in.
know, yeah. But eventually I could like, they could get a cough and I would be like, oh, it's probably just a cold and not going to like, oh my gosh, it's probably this. They're going to have pneumonia. They're going to end up in the hospital and like go down that rabbit hole of
Mm,
obsessive thinking. Um, and it just freed me from that
mm,
torture of anxiety that I'd had for my whole life, but it was motherhood that brought it all up. Like it was just like, okay, you can't ignore this anymore. There's all this history and all this
mm-hmm,
trauma that is available to be healed. So it started there, and then I've sort of brain spotted on and off as needed throughout my life. One of my favorite brain spotting stories of late with myself is I made this pretty major financial mistake, and I was just beating myself up for it. I was back in the obsessive thinking. I could not
mm-hmm.
let it go. And I recently had read the book "It's Not Your Money" by Tosha Silver. It's amazing. It's for a yogi. It's a great book. Great book
Mm-hmm.
about money. Um, and so I kept offering to the divine, like just trying to surrender, trying to let it go. Okay, whatever will be, will be. Like, I release me of this burden, but I could not. I couldn't. I couldn't. I couldn't let it go. So I saw my brain spotting person. And I'm like, we got to work on this. And I ended up processing all this old money trauma that I had stored in my body from my
Mm-hmm.
parents, my mom and dad fighting about um, debt. My dad finding out my mom had tens of thousands of credit card debt, not knowing it, and I was just like, all these
Mm,
things came up in me. So I finished my brain spotting, and I'm like, okay, I had my session. I felt better, and then all of a sudden, I had this little nugget of insight drop into my brain
mm-hmm.
about you need to do this thing. You need to file this complaint. And I was like, huh, can I do that? So I looked it up and I'm doing this work to figure out how I could fix this financial mess that I'd put myself into.
Mm-hmm.
And and then I could surrender to the divine. And then I was like, okay, I feel like I've done everything I can. I felt so much more at peace. I was no longer beating myself up. And then it was all taken care of. It
Yeah.
was gone. The everything just, it was all taken care of. It was like I was relieved of this debt and all this stuff. And I was just like, oh my God. So we do all these things, these like yogic things, and we're surrendering and praying and chanting and doing all this stuff to clear.
Mm-hmm.
But I had all this gunk in my system that was
Yeah.
really getting in the way of me truly trusting in the
Mm-hmm.
divine to take care of this and that I would be okay no matter what happened. And once
Yeah.
I was able to clear that old trauma out, I was just like, okay, whatever is going to happen. And then it all resolved itself. But I couldn't have done it without the brain spotting.
I actually really love those two examples because they would be classified as small T traumas.
Yeah.
And I think for when we have kids, it brings up all this stuff. And for me, I felt pretty stable before my kid came along, and I have ADHD. And after he came, I was like, oh my God, like I just couldn't even focus. And it's like
Mm-hmm.
my ADD was in the background and it wasn't a big deal. And then all of a sudden it was just super intense. And so I think that this is common, especially like when I only have one, I can't imagine having three, but that when we have kids, that it brings in this old wounding that we're not really aware of. And then I think with the money example too, that we unintentionally hold lots of wounding and ideas and thoughts around money that we don't even know. And it could be like, we're not worthy, or I can't make it, or people that are wealthy are assholes, or whatever this thinking is that slowly drips on us over the years. And it really affects how we move through in the world financially, and how we view money, and how money comes to us, and how money leaves us. And so I love those examples, because they aren't giant traumas, but in a way they are, because they shape our reality and affect the way that we move and flow through life. And so it just shows how something small can be something big. And then we can bring it in to brain spotting, and there can be this resolution that opens up all of these channels and all of these doors and all of this freedom. And so I'm curious about, when you were going through that process, was it difficult and painful and long, and was it a big struggle?
My second process, the money process, that process,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the brain spotting itself was like 45 minutes, right? But
Mm-hmm.
the whole process was like months.
Mm-hmm.
I
Right.
mean, it took like months of and months.
Well,
And but I was at a place where I could really just be like,
mm-hmm.
I it's all gonna be fine. Like it's all gonna be fine. But I
Mm-hmm.
was not there because money was such a issue
Mm-hmm.
in my life as a child, that I just felt chronically unsafe. And if you screw up with money, you're like, oh my God, that's like the worst thing you could ever do, right? But yeah, the process, it took months, but
Mm-hmm.
then it was resolved and it was like, oh, so good. But I think you're right. Like, I think we think of these interventions like brain spotting and EMDR, I'm not as familiar with, as you know, as being this thing where we go for, like, I see lots of clients with car accidents, like I mentioned to you when we chatted before, or you have these very obvious big T traumas that are just like,
Mm-hmm.
but it's these subtle things that do shape us and how we perceive and experience our lives and our realities, that with brain spotting, you don't always have to know exactly what was going to come up. I often don't know what's going to come up when I brain spot, or when I brain spot my own clients. People will be
Mm-hmm.
like, I never knew I was going to go there. I haven't thought about that in like forever.
Yeah, it's because when you're accessing and opening up those networks on the other side of the brain, then all of a sudden these new memories start to flood in.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's super fascinating.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's amazing. I mean, it's amazing.
Do you
It's
feel
fun.
it's important for somebody who is looking for brain spotting to go to a licensed therapist? Or do you feel some of the brain spotting training is adequate? Because there's a lot of coaches out there.
Mhm.
And I'm not anti-coach, because I think there's some incredible coaches, but I do have the feeling that there is a little bit of a leveling up being a licensed therapist, because there's other modalities that you're using, and it's not just brain spotting, and you have a lot of background. And so I'm just really curious about your thoughts on that.
I have a brain spotting therapist that I see,
Mm-hmm.
but my brain spotting around money was all with a coach.
Mm-hmm.
And I found them to be equally effective.
Yeah.
But the coach that I used was incredibly skilled and had a deep understanding of attachment and those sorts of things.
Mm-hmm.
She wasn't some, like, I took a 6 week sort of, training, and I'm going to call myself a coach because I went through this thing and I have no training. It's sort of sticky in the coaching world, I would say, because just like not all coaches are equal, but
Mm-hmm.
neither all therapists, right? So it's hard to say. I think you want to be sure that you ask really good questions
Mm-hmm.
and make sure that they have a significant amount of experience in whatever it is that you're struggling with. And there are some things that are just not appropriate for coaches to work with.
Mm-hmm.
And people in the coaching world, because I do both coaching and therapy and sort of been immersed in the coaching world, uh it's messy. It's like it's so messy. Out there in the
Right.
world.
Well, because when you're working with trauma, And like we were talking about, yours were small traumas, but big issues, right? And trauma can look so different. But when we're working with some big traumas, we can open up some wounds, and somebody needs to know how to work with those.
Exactly. And so that's why if you are with a coach, you really need to know that they either have your back or that you are stable enough to be able to withstand whatever comes up, because not all clients are. Not all clients are able to do that. And then they really need more clinical intervention. That's for sure.
Yeah. And that's the same thing with the EMDR. It's the very first thing that you do is make sure that people can support themselves, have that in place between sessions, and really start to integrate that into all of the sessions and give them more and more skills. Because when you're doing this kind of work, things can pop up in between sessions, and that person needs to be able to self-regulate in between the sessions.
Yes. Yes. In Brainspotting, we say that the sessions are like bookends, and most of the healing happens in between sessions. And I feel like people can get a little bit of what I call a Brainspotting hangover, because it literally can kind of feel that way sometimes. Just like you're tired, you're kind of blah, blah, I don't really want to do much, or sometimes there's more like, ooh, I've had a little uptick of anxiety, or I'm feeling a little more weepy. So that definitely happens with Brainspotting too. So having them have some solid things they can rely on and people to reach out to. I'm available to my clients after a Brainspotting session if they're like, I'm feeling this thing, whatever it is, just because sometimes they just need that touch point, right? Okay, you're still there. I'll see you next week. I'm going to make it till then, like I'm going to go do this breath work, or I'm going to go take a bath or sit on the earth. Or do these yoga poses or whatever it is. Sometimes they just need to know you're there. It's that thread of attachment.
Yeah. Yeah. That there's support out there and available. Yeah. Do you feel like there's anything that we missed that you'd love to share about Brainspotting?
I think one of the things to keep in mind about Brainspotting is that the basic premise is where you look affects how you feel. So just notice, like when you're working with your clients or when you're talking with people on a podcast, you'll notice their eyes are going to specific places, and just pay attention to that. Or for me, like my thinking spot is often up to my left. Like I kind of know that's where I access information. And, just within yourself, as you're like processing, if you're talking to a friend about difficult stuff, just notice where your eyes go. Because from there, you are accessing this file in your brain that's going to, that helps you to like process.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Perfect.
Yeah.
Well, Nicole, how can people reach with you, work with you? What are some of your offerings? And then of course, I'm going to drop all that in the show notes as well.
Yeah. So I'm a licensed therapist here in Colorado, and I'm licensed in Michigan as well. And so I provide Brainspotting for women, and mostly women. I do have a couple men that I see, but I really specialize in women's physical and emotional health, anxiety, postpartum stuff, grief, trauma. And I have my website is NicoleJones.com. And then I also have my money course, which is called Awakened Wealth. And that's awakened-wealth.com. And that is a coaching course. So
and what I love about what you just said too is that you're specializing with women with postpartum, and you're the money mindset coach. And it's speaking from experience, from having moved through that yourself. And that's how we become the best experts in our field, is by diving through our own journey.
I know. Oh, I can't do things. I haven't healed. Like I'm so much in that integrity of myself. Like I can't, I just can't, I gotta do my work.
Yeah. Darn it. We can't bypass.
I know. No spiritual bypassing, which I think Brainspotting helps you to avoid, because you have to sit in the difficulty.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm a big believer that any growth happens from sitting in uncomfortableness, with relationships, with everything. It's just being uncomfortable and sitting with that. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Nicole, for coming on. I really appreciate your experience and for educating me. I didn't know much about it, and I feel like I know a lot more. And so thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. It's been a joy. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to the Connected Community Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, share, and subscribe. I can be found at www.nikkiyoga.com, NICKYYYOGA.com. Until I see you again next week, I hope you have a beautiful day.